sort of kick things off, we're going to be talking about scale, obviously. Just a little preview. We're going to talk about what it even is, because I think when we say the word scale, there's so many different things we can all think of. We're going to talk about why, because most importantly, who cares? Why should you even focus on this? Then last, we'll sort of talk about how. And the big insight is going to be it's all around collaboration. You're not competing with your fellow freelancers. You're competing against the agency, and you're actually competing against your client hiring you, which I know can sound crazy, but we'll discuss when we get there. So just a quick about me. I think I owe everything to freelance. Started as a freelancer, then started leading freelance teams, then started leading companies by hiring freelancers. And so there's sort of three ways to tap into the freelance economy, I like to say. And that is being a freelancer yourself, hiring freelancers, building a company around it. And so InnoGeek Group was actually my freelance agency. It was market research, management consulting. And then from that, Gigster was very, very complex custom software using all freelancers. So we're talking, $1 to $12 million software projects, all freelancers around the world. From there, Microsoft was how do we scale freelance across the organization? So that was getting the Microsofts, the GEs, the J&Js to go from spending, say, only $10,000 on freelancers to millions, to 50 million, to 100 million. And lastly, what we do now is, okay, how do we actually couple this together? Because from a client side, one major problem is that companies aren't spending as much as they should on you. And what I mean by that is they say, hey, we want to spend $50 million this year on freelancers, but we're stuck at like $1 million to $5 million. And so sort of what I do now is how do we close that gap by helping you, the individual freelancer? So about you, this is kind of a little bit of a summary of the keynote, but some myths we have to shatter right away about you is that you are not the gig economy, you're not the 4-hour work week, and you are the future of work. So if you're a freelancer who does just want to do tasks, you might want to tune out now just because this presentation is probably not going to be too helpful for you. And the major thing is when we say you are the future of work, what we mean by that is this is so much more than just freelancing or just working from home. This is a fundamental transformation in how we work in going from the office, specifically a physical and full-time space, to digital, remote, and independent models. So you as a freelancer, this is the best time in the history of the world for you to start, being an independent expert, because this is the way work is going. So in terms of what scale actually means, I like to think about it as growth and control. Growth meaning you're going from making 100K a year to 200 to 300 to 400 to 500. Also, the projects are going from being just an article, and I'll show you a little hierarchy of what I would mean by this. But you're going from just doing a website to actually taking over all the digital transformation. Control, meaning you're not working 80 hours a week if you don't want to. I think that's one of the worst parts when you start freelancing is you get stuck in the hamster wheel. And it's sort of inevitable, right? You've been working for 6 months to a year. All of a sudden you're working 80 hours a week, and the next week you have no projects and you're stuck in this never-ending loop. And so when we say scale, we mean growth and control, and they can kind of both sit on their own. In terms of sort of a funny example, this will make sense in about 1 minute, okay? My favorite story about scale comes back to the North America's largest motorcycle manufacturer had a major problem in that they had to give their riders a digital experience. Because if we look at these people, right, they have hilarious assless chaps, they have great biker outfits, but they're not the most digitally advanced. And so when you think about what software developers wake up and say, I want to work for this company, it's probably not a large motorcycle manufacturer. But they needed to create a mobile app and they needed to create a full digital experience. So they tapped into 25 to 30 different freelancers and created a mobile app, did a bunch of Bluetooth functionality, and had this absolutely incredible project that lasted multi-years. 100% they're freelancers. I think there was one PM sitting in their full-time office and 25 to 30 incredible freelancers around the world. So that to me, when I think about sort of a massive case study of what can go right from a both client side and freelancer side is a project like that. And the app, the experience has been incredible. The app is doing incredible. And when we think about we can call it sort of a scale hierarchy. What we mean by that is that Harley experience was sort of all the way to the right, but the way that companies are engaging with you, we can kind of break it up into 3 specific buckets. The first bucket is quick outcomes, right? And this is what most of us are probably, when we think freelancer or gig economy, that's what most people are talking about. Article, research, maybe landing page, outcomes that are less than 5K. In the middle is when we start to climb up this scale hierarchy, and we're going from things that are outcomes to things that are more of ownership based. So instead of just doing an article, that's doing a full book or doing a full website or taking over a full white paper. And then all the way to the right is where we see this fully at scale projects that are usually greater than 15K, usually lasting more than 3 to 6 months. And also think about this is probably your retainer or your anchor projects as well. So in terms of why, the most important thing about this, clients need us to scale. In the end of the day, whether we want to or not, the clients need us to. And that was why when a company would say we want to spend 50K or 50 million and we're only spending 1 to 5, the reason was because we weren't working at scale. So what I mean by that, so let's sort of dig deeper there. The baggage that we have as freelancers right now, and it's not necessarily our fault, but the two major bottlenecks in clients adopting us and the things they would say. The first was that we're too hard. And the second was that we're inconsistent. And in terms of being too hard, that means, if you think about it, and we'll show you the exact sort of reason, but too hard means they don't want to hire freelancers. Like no one wakes up and says, I can't wait to hire. And we'll sort of give you the disconnects. And inconsistent means if you had two people hiring freelancers, one had an incredible experience, the other person got fired. And that's a serious thing. And so we'll sort of get deeper into why that's the case. But from a client side, when we say they, and because the big insight is that they expect an agency experience, what you have to understand about your client is, number one, they're not in HR. So that's what I mean by they wake up and they don't say, I can't wait to hire a freelancer. The second thing is they don't want to hire you. They want to get work done. And the third thing is they don't know what they want. And I think that's one major difference that we would, and problem that we would have would be you're going with someone who they'd say, I have this major problem, but they don't even know if the problem that they need requires the freelancer that they're hiring for. And on the agency side, the major disconnect was that they expected you to say yes to everything. They expected you to scale with demand, meaning today you're doing one article, but tomorrow they might need 10 or even 50. Can you take that on? And then the third, I say consistent may, because we all know an agency is maybe a C+ to a B+, but it's consistent. And so even though it wasn't the best, it's still consistent. Now, sort of get the elephant out of the room, COVID's just increased this. And the reason for that is because at first, freelancing is, if you're really geeky and you like software, there's a term early adopters. At first, freelance was taken on by the early adopters. But as we're climbing up the scale hierarchy, we're going towards decision makers who are used to hiring the agency, specifically the saying yes, the scaling, and being consistent. And so as demand is increasing with COVID, also are the expectations. And so if we're not ready to catch this demand, we're not going to be able to get it. So solution is to scale. In terms of how, right? There's many different ways. And so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to take all the different ways and just put it into a simple framework. The number one thing I want you all to take away is it's your own unique journey. And so these three things, are going to be different for everybody. The first thing is having a strong network. Second is strong outcomes. Third is strong operations. What I mean by that, now in white, this is why it's important to you, in white all the way at the bottom. The sort of first thing in terms of having a strong network, it's your factor to grow, and growth in many different ways. When you're collaborating with other freelancers, meaning you're teaming up, you can also refer work to other freelancers. But to be honest, and I think you all can agree, the growth you have from just having relationships with other freelancers might be deeper than any of the actual work. From an outcomes perspective, this is where you need to own the engagement, build the trust. And let me just give you a quick thing about strong network, strong outcomes, strong operations. So strong network is simply being able, like I said, to collaborate with your work. Strong outcomes is how in the world do you consistently underpromise and overdeliver when you have 3+ clients at one time, and each client probably has different systems and different expectations. Strong operations is your own business operations. So how do you as a business get better as the more you have projects? So back to sort of the why. Strong outcomes allows you to upsell. One major thing that sort of is different about freelancing in this environment versus just when you're like a passive Upwork freelancer is you don't want a million clients. You don't always want to be searching for work. You ideally want to start on one project and upsell, and scale across the organization. And your clients want you to too. And then from an operations perspective, that's when we're talking about profit. Because one of the worst things, like we said about the hamster wheel, is that you work so much, and then the next week you end up having no work. And so how in the world are we going to make sure that as you are getting more work, you're scaling and you're not working more, but you're actually growing your business? So in terms of some myths that we have to shatter when we're talking about this, when it comes to your network, your competition is not freelancers. Can't stress this enough. Your competition is agencies, and like I said, yourself. The reason that I say yourself is because you have no idea how many projects clients don't hire you for simply because it's too hard, or simply because you haven't made it easy for them. One sort of quick thing is a lot of times clients, they have a need, but they don't want to actually post the job or do the shortlisting. And so if you had caught up with them every month or 2 months and just gave them a ping, they probably would have hired you. It's just that they needed the push. Now, in terms of myths related to outcomes, and this is where it's tough as a freelancer, you're more than just the actual work. What I mean by that is if you're a creative doing a landing page or doing an article or blog post, the actual work itself isn't necessarily what's driving the client experience. It might be the actual communication or the expectation alignment. And sort of three things that I always stand out from a client experience is little things like status updates from a communication perspective. Does your client feel comfortable knowing sort of where the project's at? Second thing is delivery emails. Is it short? Is it concise? And when I say aligning expectations, you might build them this beautiful, beautiful thing, but they didn't need that. They just needed something that was a B+ and in 5 days. And if you didn't align those expectations, then they might consider that a bad project, even though the outcome was beautiful. And then from an operations perspective, there's no magic tool. Listen, I lead a software company, and I should say, we are the best, and you need this, and yada, yada, yada. The reality is you don't. You don't need anything. You just need the processes, not necessarily these magic tools. So this, I'm not going to go fully through it. We'll give this to you all. You can think about this as a sort of homework or a worksheet or something like that. We'll give this to you all after the conference, but here's just a little heads up. This could be your homework. Now, most important, deeper than any sort of steps, is just get out there and act. I think when we're talking about scale, you're going to fail. You're going to fail a lot. But most importantly, you have to act, you have to measure, and you have to learn. Quick tidbit. If you think about sort of a lot of times in entrepreneurship, one of the worst things you can do is just sit there and ponder about a good idea, because an idea is usually nothing, right? An idea is maybe 1% of it. It's really about the execution. No different for you. If you have an idea in regards to scale, get out there, act on it, measure, learn. You're going to get better with time. So let's open up for questions. Start grilling me. Let's get super, super tangible. And like I said, from a questions perspective, use me for my enterprise client experience, right? Use me for what these clients need. And yeah, let's open it up. And also too, just a heads up, just a little plug. Sorry, Alita. Y'all do have exclusive access coming from Freelancer Business Month. So, feel free to use that link.